The Israeli-Palestinian-Lebanese conflict is one of the most intractable and tragic conflicts of our time. It has roots that stretch back over a century, with deep-seated historical, religious and cultural dimensions that make it incredibly complex. For decades, it has claimed countless lives, displaced millions and left entire communities in ruins. The human toll is staggering, with families torn apart and generations growing up amidst violence and uncertainty. This ongoing strife has fueled a relentless cycle of violence and mistrust, making peace seem like a distant dream. The daily reality for many is one of fear and instability. Understanding this complex conflict requires delving into its historical roots, from the early 20th century to the present day. Each event has added layers of complexity and pain. Examining the political and social dynamics at play is crucial. The roles of various governments, political factions, and international actors have all contributed to the current state of affairs. And we must acknowledge the profound human cost. The suffering of civilians, the loss of life, and the psychological scars left on those who survive are immeasurable. This conflict is not just a regional issue, it reverberates across the globe. The international community watches closely, often intervening, sometimes exacerbating the situation. It has far-reaching international implications affecting global politics, economics, and security. The involvement of global powers adds another layer of complexity. With global powers entangled in its web, the conflict becomes a focal point of international diplomacy and strategy. Efforts to mediate and resolve the conflict are ongoing, but fraught with challenges. While the path to peace is fraught with obstacles, including deep-seated mistrust and political complexities, the pursuit of a just and lasting solution remains an urgent moral imperative. The hope for peace lies in the resilience and determination of those who continue to strive for a better future, despite the odds. Their efforts remind us that peace is not just a distant dream, but a possibility worth fighting for. The roots of this conflict can be traced back to the early 20th century, with the rise of both Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish state in Palestine, and Arab nationalism. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I and the subsequent British mandate for Palestine further complicated the situation. Promises were made to both Jews and Arabs, creating conflicting aspirations for the same land. Tensions escalated in the following decades, culminating in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The 1948 war resulted in the establishment of the State of Israel, a watershed moment that had profound consequences for the region. For Israelis, it was a triumph, the realization of a long-held dream for a Jewish homeland after centuries of persecution. However, for Palestinians, it was the Nakba, the catastrophe, as hundreds of thousands were displaced from their homes, becoming refugees in neighboring countries, including Lebanon. This displacement created a festering wound, a core grievance that continues to fuel the conflict today. The Six-Day War in 1967 further altered the geopolitical landscape. Israel's decisive victory resulted in its occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. This occupation, now spanning over 5 decades, has had a profound impact on Palestinian lives, restricting their movement, access to resources, and political self-determination. The settlements that Israel established in the occupied territories have become a major point of contention, considered illegal under international law. Lebanon, a country with its own complex history and demographics, became deeply entangled in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The influx of Palestinian refugees after 1948 significantly altered the country's social and political fabric. The presence of armed Palestinian groups operating from within Lebanon led to cross-border raids and Israeli reprisals, further destabilizing the country. Lebanon, already grappling with internal divisions, became a battleground for a larger conflict. In the 1980s, amidst Lebanon's own devastating civil war, Hezbollah emerged as a powerful force. A Shia Islamist political party and militant group, Hezbollah was formed with the support of Iran to resist Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. Hezbollah's military capabilities grew significantly over the years, and it has fought several wars with Israel. It is now considered one of the most formidable armed groups in the region, with a sophisticated arsenal of rockets and missiles. Section 7, a human tragedy, the cost of perpetual conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian-Lebanese conflict has exacted a devastating toll on all sides. Countless lives have been lost, and generations have grown up in the shadow of violence and insecurity. The conflict has fueled cycles of revenge and retribution, making reconciliation even more elusive. The humanitarian consequences are particularly stark. Palestinians in Gaza live under a crippling blockade, while those in the West Bank face restrictions on their movement and daily life. Lebanese communities have also borne the brunt of Israeli military operations, with civilian casualties and infrastructure destroyed. Section 8, the world watches international involvement and impasse. The international community has long been involved in trying to resolve the conflict, but with limited success. Despite numerous peace talks and diplomatic efforts, the situation remains complex and deeply rooted in historical grievances. The United States, as Israel's closest ally, has played a pivotal role, often acting as a mediator, but also providing significant military and financial aid to Israel. This dual role has sometimes been a source of contention, as it raises questions about impartiality in mediation efforts. The European Union, Russia, and the United Nations have also been involved in diplomatic efforts, providing humanitarian aid and attempting to broker ceasefires. Each of these entities brings its own perspective and interest to the table, which can sometimes complicate unified action. However, deep divisions within the international community, particularly regarding the legitimacy of Israeli settlements and the role of Hamas, have hindered progress towards a lasting peace. These divisions are often reflected in the debates at the United Nations, where resolutions are frequently met with vetoes or abstentions, further stalling any potential progress. Humanitarian efforts continue amidst the political stalemate, with numerous organizations working tirelessly to provide aid to those affected by the conflict. Refugee camps and displaced populations are a stark reminder of the human cost of this ongoing impasse. Despite the challenges, there are ongoing efforts by peace activists and international leaders to foster dialogue and understanding. Cultural exchanges and grassroots movements aim to build bridges where political efforts have faltered, offering a glimmer of hope for a more peaceful future. Section 9. A glimmer of hope? The long road to peace. Despite the seemingly intractable nature of the conflict, there have been glimmers of hope and attempts at dialogue. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s, while ultimately unsuccessful, offered a framework for a two-state solution, with Israel and an independent Palestine coexisting side by side. However, continued violence, settlement expansion, and political divisions have eroded trust and made a negotiated settlement even more difficult. Section 10. The future of the region. Challenges and opportunities. The future of the Israeli-Palestinian-Lebanese conflict remains uncertain. The region has been a focal point of geopolitical tension for decades, with deep-rooted historical, cultural and political complexities. The current situation is unsustainable, with the risk of renewed violence always present. The cycle of conflict and retaliation has left scars on the land and its people, making everyday life a struggle for many. Finding a path to peace requires addressing the root causes of the conflict, including the Palestinian refugee issue, the status of Jerusalem, the issue of settlements, and the presence of armed groups. These issues are deeply intertwined, each feeding into the other, creating a complex web that is difficult to untangle. The presence of armed groups adds another layer of complexity, as their actions often escalate tensions and provoke military responses. It demands courageous leadership, a willingness to compromise, and a commitment to dialogue and reconciliation. Leaders must rise above partisan interests and work towards a vision of peace that benefits all parties involved. The international community has a critical role to play in supporting these efforts. providing humanitarian assistance, facilitating dialogue, and ensuring that peace agreements are upheld. They must also hold all parties accountable for their actions, ensuring that violations of human rights and international law are addressed. The human cost of this conflict is simply too high to accept anything less than a just and lasting peace. Families have been torn apart, lives have been lost, and generations have grown up knowing only conflict. The hope for a better future lies in the hands of those willing to work tirelessly for peace.